Today on Biblical Higher Ed Talk, I sit down with Mark Barnes, Principal Product Manager at Logos Bible Software, to discuss the impact of AI on theological education, biblical engagement tools, and ministry. Thank you for tuning in today. I'm your host, Philip Dearborn, president of ABHE, and we are honored to have as our guest this week, Mark Barnes. In fact, this is going to be 2 episodes, part 1 and part 2, as we discuss a couple of different topics along the way. Mark is the principal product manager at Logos Bible Software. And Logos has been such a key partner of ABHE for many years, providing what I think is the best tool out there for those who are serious about studying the Word of God. They have quite the footprint, a global footprint of their product, not only in Bible colleges, Christian colleges, seminaries, but also in ministry contexts. And they are sponsors of a series of these podcasts. So I've invited Mark in to have a conversation around a couple topics that I'll introduce here in a second. But Mark has served in ministry and business contexts with a unique skill set of being able to be passionate about theological things, but also a keen understanding on technology. I've invited him for 2 topics. So this particular show that we have, this first episode, we're going to talk about AI. And there's a lot out there about artificial intelligence. And we're going to try to hone our conversation into the impact of AI in ministry context, but also the tools that we use in order to do the things of ministry, things like Logos. And then in the second episode, we'll talk about what Mark is seeing just from a global perspective in ministry and ministry preparation. In North America, we have a tendency to have a particular perspective on things, and in the process, ignoring the rest of the world. And I think Mark has a unique perspective on that. So welcome, Mark, and thanks for joining us for these 2 episodes.
Thank you very much. It's a very generous introduction, but I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Glad to be able to join you today.
Great. And with the beauty of technology, I am in the Mid-Atlantic region, and you are over in Europe, in England, correct? Or no, you're in France.
I'm in Wales. My hometown is Wrexham, which has been made a little bit famous in the US thanks to the Welcome to Wrexham TV series. So that is my hometown. But I'm currently based in South Wales, which is about 4 hours west of London.
Okay, great. And so the important question is, what football team do you follow?
Yeah, well, Wrexham, as I said, is my hometown, and I grew up supporting them. I still get to, half a dozen games a season, something like that. So looking forward to going in 2 or 3 weeks' time. I've got tickets for a game. So it's a good time to be a Wrexham supporter at the moment.
My son plays, we call it soccer here, but football, or played football, youth football, and his coach for many years was actually from Hull in England, other side of England. Yeah. And we brought the whole team to England and did a tour and got to go to a Premier League game. If ever any of our listeners have a chance to go to an English Premier League soccer game, it is unbelievable. It's quite the atmosphere. It's hard to even put it into words.
Yeah, certainly. It can be very tribal. I think one of the great things about soccer here is the teams are so close together. So there's often a kind of, you get the away fans and the home fans, and there's a real sense of rivalry and banter within the game that can be great fun.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us from across the pond, as we say. Again, a special shout out to Logos. We really do appreciate you all and the work that you do in helping so many of our institutions from a curricular resource perspective. So our audience can get to know you. Again, this is 2 parts. So just to get to know you a little bit, talk to us about a defining moment in your life that kind of shaped you to pursue church ministry and then moving on into Logos.
I was 21 years old. It was a Saturday night, about 10 o'clock in the evening. I was in McDonald's and they just messed my order up. That's probably the defining moment that helped me to pursue church ministry. Do you want the rest of the story?
You ought to give us the rest of the story there.
Okay, I'll rewind a little bit to tell you what happened before we got to McDonald's. So I was in a small church. It wasn't an easy time in the life of the church. The pastor had left. The elders had resigned. There'd been some difficulties and problems. And as a result of that, there were really not many people left, honestly, to help. I'd stayed around in the church when many of my friends had gone off to college because I was working for a Christian nonprofit. And therefore, in the youth group and in some other situations, there was literally nobody else to give the little talk at the end. So nobody asked me to do it, but I just felt I'm the oldest person here. It was my responsibility as a Christian to try and help where I could. So I was doing little bits and pieces like that. That grew over time, and eventually started to get asked to do a little bit of preaching in some, again, very small churches that didn't have a pastor.
And is this all in Wales?
Yeah, this is all in Wrexham in North Wales. Yeah, in that area. That was kind of okay, I guess. Again, nobody had really asked me. Nobody had really tested my gifts, and the church wasn't really in a place where it could mentor me or anything like that at the time. So then I ended up in McDonald's on that Saturday night at 10 o'clock. I placed my order. The order was wrong. And I went back to the counter to complain. As I was about to complain, the lady who'd served me, they have a little name badge. And then there's kind of stars above the name badge after you've been there a little while or past courses. I'm not sure how it works, but she didn't have any stars. And as I was about to complain, I thought to myself, it's not her fault. She hasn't had any training yet. And as I said that, in my mind, I didn't even speak it out loud. I realized I was in exactly the same position with my preaching and the talks and other things that I was doing. And I felt the Lord was saying strongly to me, look, if you're going to do this, you need to get trained. That was a Saturday. On the Monday, I called up the seminary and started the application process for going to seminary.
Wow. What a great story. I love that. How God uses the mundane things of life to point you into a direction, and nothing happens by accident.
Yep.
And it's amazing to me that you even recollect it as if it were yesterday, like you remember the details around it. Yeah. So then that launched for you a pursuit of education. And in next week's episode, we'll kind of talk about that educational pursuit for you. But you spent then a number of years in church ministry.
Yeah, 3 years in Bible college, did some postgrad research and combined the research with working part-time for a church doing pastoral ministry, did a little bit of lecturing at the seminary as well, and then eventually full-time Christian ministry. So about 20 years total pastoral ministry.
Yeah. And now talk to us a little bit about the IT side of it too. How does that weave into this story?
Yeah, I said at the beginning that one of the reasons I was still in my home church and hadn't gone to college was because I was working for a Christian nonprofit that was in IT. It was a fairly small nonprofit that had been started by somebody in my church. And they needed people to help. And I really loved IT and computers. I always had enjoyed that. That was my role there. And then even after seminary, when I was doing part-time pastoral ministry, I was also working for a different Christian nonprofit in IT. For most of that period, I'd been part-time in a church, part-time in a Christian nonprofit. But occasionally, maybe full-time in one and full-time in the other. It did vary a little bit, but usually a foot in both camps.
And now you've been with Logos for a number of years?
About 2.5 years I've been with Logos, yeah.
Okay. And you're principal product manager. So just give it, what does that mean?
It basically means that I lead the decision-making on how we improve the software for pastors, for seminarians, for lay people. So my job really is to talk to our customers, bring my own experience from both church ministry and seminary into the company, and to help our engineers who are obviously very technically minded, but don't necessarily have that background and experience to know what our customers need in order to be able to study the Bible better and to work with others to draw up ways in which we can improve that for people.
Which is one of the things I love about Logos as a company. And I've been aware of you all for a number of years. And as technology has shifted and changed and deliveries have shifted and changed, Logos has really done a good job, I think, of keeping pace with that. From a usability perspective, it's a high performance machine. And I think you've done a good job of making it accessible for folks to be able to use in not only their educational context, but more importantly, into the ministry context. So AI. It feels like everything is AI now, and everyone's an expert on AI. And then you have experts correcting experts on AI. And there's some element of it like, okay, we get it. AI is here, and that's true. It's not going to go away. AI has been with us actually longer than people realize. there's an element of it it's simply the next iteration of technology and what we're building around us. So I don't really want to spend time on, is it, we should get rid of it or shouldn't we have it? It's here, right? So let's embrace what it is. So let's start with this. How are you seeing AI applied in theological education?
There's a lot of variety. We're seeing that some seminaries and higher education colleges have taken what you might consider to be an anti-AI stance, effectively banning students' use of it. So that's decreasing, but certainly there are plenty of examples of that. But equally, there are examples where schools are trying to encourage the use of AI in the right places, and therefore, are teaching classes on, the responsible use of AI. I myself was invited to give a presentation to a college, to students, about exactly that kind of thing. So it really does depend on the thinking of the institution itself. For myself, I would be in agreement with you. It's here. It's certainly not going away. And the right approach, from my perspective, is to really help students to use it in the right way. I think if we try and ban it, A, it won't work, and B, we'll lose the opportunity really to teach people how to use a powerful tool really well.
Yeah, I think it is some of the reaction, which when it first came out, and I even saw some of the policies that some of our institutions were writing. To me, it was more of a reflection on we really haven't done a good job of talking about what it means to live in a biblically integrated world and have a biblical worldview on things, because there's a way by which we think through and process things. And it's almost like we ejected all of that when AI came out, because we saw it as a threat. Probably from a number of different levels, from, faculty. The students are going to be submitting papers that aren't theirs and are just AI generated. And so there was a fear factor that was there layered in, versus just kind of being able to understand it and say, okay, how can we actually leverage this for good? So that's on the college education side. How are you seeing AI engaging with or integrated into the ministry side of things?
Yeah, I think again, there's a lot of variety. There are probably some differences, age differences, as well as there often is in the way that people adopt new technology. I'm seeing some pastors who are, quite happy, honestly, with the processes that they have already and not seeing the need to integrate with AI. I think the kind of most positive uses that I'm seeing amongst pastors is when they use like ChatGPT as more of a kind of conversation partner, to help them to think things through, not to write content for them, but maybe give examples, and then perhaps the pastor would choose from some of those examples and rewrite them into their message, or even to analyze a sermon afterwards. I've done this myself a few times, copied and pasted a sermon into ChatGPT and said, assess this sermon. Does it have enough theological teaching? Does it have enough practical application? Are there enough illustrations in there? Are they vivid enough? Those sorts of questions that I would ask myself after a sermon. Sometimes I don't answer those questions as honestly as I should do, because I've been in there preparing for a long time. It's my baby, and it's not perfect, but it's pretty good. So sometimes having that kind of independent, as it were, assessment is very helpful. And not that, you listen to everything that it says and it'll get some things wrong, but it can be an extra kind of benefit that can be really helpful. And of course, now that we're integrating AI into Logos, then, that's become another way in which I'm using AI in both Bible study and in sermon preparation.
Yeah. A lot of people are doing this, and I think it's a very productive for me from an efficiency perspective. Sometimes we just get stuck on ideas, or we just need that initial spark to get going with something. Yeah. And sometimes, it's very helpful to prompt and just to kind of get things started, and then it rolls from there. Yeah. And I think that's one of the more productive ways. And I can't wait to hear about how Logos is doing that. Before we get there are some ethical and moral issues related to the use of this. So as you've walked it, what are some of those lines?
I think the obvious one, particularly from an academic perspective, when you submit an essay, there's a sheet you have to sign. At least it's probably digital now, but when I was in seminary, it was a sheet you have to sign. Effectively, you're saying, this is all my own work. You need to be able to look yourself in the mirror and sign that piece of paper to say, yeah, what I've produced, I've used AI to help a little bit on the way. but this is all my own work. I think if you can do that and really look yourself in the mirror and say that, then I think that's a really positive thing. If you're not able to do that, then that's absolutely a big red flag. I think the other red flag for Christians especially, are we treating ChatGPT or AI like God? There's obviously been examples really of people doing that. I'm sure you've seen examples in the news of lawyers using ChatGPT to write their submission to court, and it, creating previous cases that don't exist and that kind of thing. They're not checking their sources. They're not really taking responsibility for their words. And I think the reason they do that is, here's this magical new feature, and it is like God to them. It is omniscient. And, as Christians, we should obviously know better. And we should remember that AI is trained on billions of words that have been written by humans, and it has all the faults that humans have, all the qualities that human has. It's all mixed in there. And that's why maybe sometimes it can look godlike almost, because it's using human input, and we're of course created in the image of God, but it is not God, and we should never treat it that way. And as soon as there's any hint of that, then obviously that's a big red flag.
Which is a fascinating theological conversation about just how it actually reflects humanity, the good of what we've done, but also its limitations. And I guess the term is it hallucinates, right? The hallucination factor, which is a human condition, right? If we don't know something, we lie, we make it up, right?
Yeah.
So there's definitely that element that's like baked into it, that it'll fill in the blanks if it doesn't know. And definitely there are some ethical lines. And I love how you put it as, and again, it's like anything that we experience in life. We know if we're indwelt by the power of the Holy Spirit is prompting us when it crosses a line into sin. And when you've crossed that line where there's been too much of a dependency on it, or that if you're in sermon preparation and you've relied too heavily on it, and it's Friday afternoon and you're desperate to put something together, so you just prompt it to build out your sermon, and you know that it's not yours, and you know that you haven't really put in the due diligence to make it all happen, and when you've crossed that line.
That's right. And in some ways, none of that is a new problem. There's a temptation on that Friday or Saturday night, if you're really struggling, to go to Desiring God, or in previous generations and still today to the Metropolitan Tabernacle and copy and paste, or, whatever you do. In some ways, it's not a different temptation. It's just a different form of that temptation.
And easier and powerful, right?
Yeah.
So it's before you kind of had to work for it and maybe pull off the book on the shelf and put it together. Now you can just, it's a lot more expansive. So I guess it's a greater temptation to misuse it. So talk to us about Logos. How have you approached it, and kind of where do you see it going with developing or engaging AI with the product?
Yeah, we started, I think, relatively slowly and conservatively. People remember the furore when, ChatGPT especially came out, and that was seen as a game changer. We were already thinking about using AI before that happened. As you said, AI has been around for a long time. Chat is just the way it's become popularized in some way. So we started off with a very simple approach, in some ways, uncontroversial approach, I think, of can we use AI to help users to find content in their Logos library, in their books, much better than we were able to do otherwise. So that was the first AI-powered feature that we brought out. We call that Smart Search. Instead of using really precise query syntax, which we've kind of had to do in the past, it's a little bit more like Google, where you can just type in simple language what you're looking for, and the AI helps the most relevant content to come to the top and to find not just the most relevant articles, but the most relevant place within that article, and show that as a snippet. So that's where we started. It was a lot of work, honestly, to do all of that and to understand how we can use AI to improve that. But it's not creating any new content. And therefore, I think even AI skeptics have found those features helpful. Having done that, we wanted to kind of move on to, let's think more about, can we use AI to create content? But we want to make sure that that content is rooted in, again, the books and the libraries that people have. So we introduced a summarization feature where you can go to a chapter of a book or a section of a book, and you can summarize that section. We've since expanded that to be able to summarize sermons or dictionary articles, those types of things. And users have told us they find that quite valuable. And they use that for one of two reasons. Sometimes it's well, I've only got 5 minutes and this is a 30-page dictionary article. I need a quick summary. That's obviously one way people use it. But often people use it say, I got 5 dictionary articles here that I could read on this subject. And I'm not sure which is the most helpful one. So let's have a quick summary, and that will let me select the one that I think, this is the one that touches on the subject in this way. I'll read that one in full. So we're really trying to use AI to help to steer people towards the really highest quality content in their library. That's the that's how we started. Yeah.
Pause right there, because I think that's one of the things that's misunderstood about AI and how it's used. Those are actually pretty effective research principles of when you've done doctoral research, I've done doctoral research. And, I remember the days of going to a card catalog by either subject or title or author, finding it, or going to reference index, trying to find keywords to then identify, okay, maybe this article or this chapter in this book is relevant to my topic. Then I have to physically go and get it, open the book, find it, or go to microfilm or microfiche and actually scroll through to find this obscure mention, only to spend 45 minutes realizing, hey, you know what, that's not even relevant to my topic. You're still doing research. You're doing it more efficiently to very quickly realize, okay, that's not relevant to the topic that I'm looking at. That summary doesn't hit it. I'm going to go over to this one, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But back in the day when, everything was more paper-based, certainly myself, I'd really appreciate those journals that printed the abstract of the journal article before the journal. And you could just read those couple of 100 words and, okay, it's worth reading or it's not worth reading. And that's kind of what we're trying to do with Summarize, give that kind of abstract to help people know whether it's worth digging deeper. We talked earlier about that AI can be really helpful to unblock you and to get your creative juices flowing. We felt that for pastors, that was a problem. I think every pastor's experience, the sermon's going well, and then all of a sudden you grind to a halt. You need an application or you need an illustration, and you just can't settle on one that's right. So we introduced some features we call Sermon Assistant, where the user can type in the kind of subject that they're looking to either illustrate or to give some application for, set a few parameters as well. And then the AI will suggest just the very basics really of an illustration or an application that may fit. And we deliberately make those suggestions pretty short. Then, they don't tell the full story. They need to be reworked. And AI is probably intelligent enough now to be able to provide the whole thing, but we deliberately tell the AI not to do that and to keep it short because, again, we want people to be able to reword that, make it their own, rather than just copy paste. So those are, I certainly find them helpful for prompting me to do that. We've got some similar features as well for getting started with a sermon. I think, again, particularly people starting out in preaching don't always know the right questions to ask of the text or the right questions to be thinking about in preparation for the sermon. Certainly that was my experience, as I've said earlier, where I was preaching before I had training. And I think there are people who are in that situation. And even those who aren't, sometimes it can be good to be reminded. So we have a kind of outline feature that, again, doesn't write your sermon for you, but suggests, if you type in a passage and or a topic, it will suggest, well, here are some of the main teaching points in this passage. But it's up to you then to decide how you want to teach that. Here are some of the main points of application you could draw out. But again, it's up to you to decide which of those you choose and how you do that. So we just provide a few short sentences on teaching, on application, on how this passage might point to Christ and so on, and then really leave it to the pastor to expand on that and make that their own.
Yeah. Yeah. As you vision the future, I'm sure you're talking about other ways, and AI itself continues to develop and merge. Are there areas or general things that you're able to share that could potentially be enhancements using AI in the future?
Yeah, there's two that are really kind of top of mind that we think would be the biggest value to the church. The first one is a smart Bible search. So we have the smart search that brings the most useful content from your library to the top. But we don't yet have that for Bible passages. And we have all sorts of data sets in Logos that, if you know how to use them and to construct the syntax, are fairly good. We're starting to build Smart Bible Search. We hope it'll be out in Q1 next year. And the early prototypes are extremely promising. Sometimes when you're looking for a Bible verse, you're looking for something quite specific, maybe you're in a sermon and you want to illustrate something about courageous women, let's say. Now, there's not a Logos data set that lists all the courageous women, but you could use Smart Bible Search to ask a question that would say, show me the stories of courageous women in the Bible. And then you'd get the list of those. And because it's all integrated within Logos, or it will be when we release it in Q1, then you get all the benefit that you would normally. You can add it to a passage list. You can copy it into your sermon. You can interact with it in all the ordinary ways. So that integration into the software, it really does a good job of answering those sorts of questions that are very hard to answer without AI. So hopefully it will be released in Q1. The longer term hope that I can't make any promises over, but people ask me about it all of the time. And I want people to know that it is something that's very much in our minds, and something we would certainly like to do is to expand our use of AI so people can effectively talk to their books. So we have something called Smart Synopsis already, where when you type in a search query, it will take the first 5 books that get returned in that search result. It will use AI to analyze those books and to try and answer your question from the books. It will provide little footnotes back to the books and to individual pages on those books. So you can check for yourself whether or not that synopsis is accurate. But what people really want to be able to do is to be able to kind of follow on that conversation. And when they follow on the conversation, not just to worry maybe ChatGPT is hallucinating, but to be able to be confident that the follow-up answers as well also come from the books. That is a huge technical challenge, honestly, to be able to do that. But users have told us time and time again, that's what they want to be able to do. And we'd love to be able to do that. And it is something that some of our best engineers are working on prototyping right now to see whether that's possible. I'm sure it will be possible at some point. It's just whether the technology is quite there for us just yet.
And it's developing, and I'm encouraged to hear that. I've seen examples too of, from a educational perspective, being able to have and I think it's important to have a closed data set that it's working off of. I think that helps from the hallucination side of it, or to bring in elements that are not a biblical worldview or theologically appropriate. Even some of the creativity of coming into it, where, having a conversation with an early church father where it actually, or mother, and you're using some of the creativity actually creates a person or an avatar or something. And you're actually conversing with them from a historical perspective of what was life like. And it's pulling from data of what was life like in their time, and based off of their writings to actually interact with it. And it just kind of takes it to a different level of engagement. But it's fascinating to see all that's developing. Yeah. So, well, Mark, we've reached the end of this episode. So thank you very much for sharing your wisdom and your knowledge with us.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Absolutely. And if you'd like more information about Logos in the show description, feel free to go ahead and click on that. We provided that link there. And again, thanks to Logos for their continued support of ABHE. So until next time, stay kingdom focused.